Good. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming to this roundtable panel discussion titled European Energy Transition East Meets West, Young Professionals' Perspectives. My name is Csinskza Bene. I am Hungarian, but I work in the Netherlands as a policy advisor, mostly for the European Commission and also other governments. But my other hat is being a manager of a young professionals network. And this network is called, just as the panel is titled, European Energy Transition Network East Meets West. In this network, we got 30-something young professionals, all from Eastern Europe, but also from the West. We got people from Ukraine, Romania, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, also the Netherlands, Spain, and so on. And together we discuss frequently about the energy transition, how it's going in the East, what practices can be implemented from the West. And with this network, I'm also doing a little interview series, which you can check out on YouTube under Energy Investment Management. We're talking about all these people's countries, how the energy transition is going there. Again, what can we implement from the West? And yeah, please check it out. It's very informative, and we feel like it's a very important topic to touch on. And now to today's panel. I've got these three amazing young professionals with me. I'm going to shortly introduce them, and then they can also introduce themselves. Firstly, I got Maksym Semenyuk, who is a senior consultant. Also, he's also 20-something, but he's already a senior consultant at DNV for energy markets and strategy. And he's from Ukraine. And then I've got Denisa Kasa, who is investment advisor and a program manager for Eastern European investment opportunities. She's working for Energy Investment Management BV, and she's from Albania. And last but not least, I've got Kouzelis with me, who's a master's student and also the chair of the Energy Club at TU Delft, which is a very prestigious technical university in the Netherlands. These are the topics on which we are going to touch upon today. But first of all, I'm going to tell you why we are talking about Eastern Europe. So the reason is that, as some of you probably know, this region, Eastern Europe and the Balkans, is still very, very heavily reliant on fossil fuels and on mostly coal and lignite. And thus, it also presents us with very good investment opportunities, because every euro basically spent in this region has much more value and much more impact in terms of the energy transition than the same euro spent in the West. And thus, we think that it's a very attractive market. We also think it's much more exciting to work on these markets nowadays than in Western Europe. And yeah, this is where things are going to happen. So today we are going to talk about what are the current and the historical barriers that halt energy transition progress in the region, what technologies, policies, and business models can we import from the West that will accelerate the progress, and also which skills are needed for young professionals to participate in the transition. And the reason for the young professional focus is that we still have about 40 years to contribute to this energy transition. We're all 20-something-year-old people. We really realize that this is the decade of imperative climate action, and we really want to move the transition forward. So without further ado, I will now sit down and start the panel discussion with the people. Hello again. First of all, I think I will ask... Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me well? Good. I think I'll ask short introductions from everyone, maybe starting with Antonius and then coming back to me, and then we can start with the questions. Please, Antonius, introduce yourself a bit.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Csinskza, for the dear introduction. My name is Antonius. I'm Greek. I live in the Netherlands, where I studied mechanical engineering at TU Delft for my bachelor's. And after my bachelor's, I participated in the student team. In the Netherlands, we have many student teams. I'll talk about that in a bit. In that student team, we created a hydrogen-powered vehicle. Was a team manager there and had a great time. And that really introduced me into sustainability, which inspired me to do a master's in sustainable energy technologies at TU Delft. And apart from my master's, I also joined the Energy Club, which I'm representing today as a chair. And the last thing that I wanted to say is right now I'm doing my internship, my first internship at a company. It's called Lightyear, and we create long-range solar electric vehicles. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Trying to represent Western Europe, and I want to implement the ideas, technologies, and even policies. And in West Europe, we have, to the best of our ability, how we can implement that in Eastern Europe to facilitate the energy transition there. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Denisa?
Yeah, thank you, Csinskza, for the opportunity to share this panel discussion with you. And it's so refreshing to actually be talking in the renewable energy sector among such a young crowd. As you touched upon a little bit before, I'm originally from Albania, but right now I'm living and working in the Netherlands. I finished my studies in business administration, and now I'm working as an investment advisor at Energy Investment Management, and I'm also conducting a research on investment opportunities in Eastern European countries, because these can be seen as emerging markets and are becoming quite attractive for big companies that are looking to diversify their portfolios with investments. So right now markets in the West are becoming rather saturated. There are a lot of players, there is a lot of competition, whereas in Eastern Europe, the expertise is not really there, so the expertise sometimes is coming from the West. And this is what I'm trying to look into, what specific investment opportunities are there in the Eastern European region.
Very handy for this panel discussion. Thank you, Denisa. And Maksym, lastly to you.
Hello everyone, Maksym Semenyuk. As said, I'm working at DNV in the Department of Energy Markets and Strategy. What that means is we typically serve our clients who are governments, developers, transmission system operators and owners. We help them in their daily questions related to power system, grid planning, development of renewables assets, business case valuation, economic analysis and so on and so forth. The range of services is quite broad, and that's something that I like in the energy sector, and why I joined the energy sector is because there is so much to do, so much to cover. And I'm also based in the Netherlands, originally from Ukraine, where I studied applied physics, and after graduating I thought, well, energy transition seems to be a global transformation, that we really need as a society, so why not to join and why not to have my own contribution. So I think today I would like to also cover a little bit the perspective of transformation that I'm seeing in the Western Europe, and what I'm also monitoring back in the home country in Ukraine, and how I see the relation, how I see the interaction between the two worlds that we are divided in this conversation today, but in fact we would like to connect them and make them closer to each other.
Amazing, thank you, Maksym. In fact, we all represent both the East and the West, because all of us are from Eastern Europe or the Balkans, but we are living in the Netherlands and working in Western countries. So with that, I would begin. Actually, I would first turn to Maksym. I would like to ask you to introduce us to the brief historical reasons of why the region is lagging behind. And yeah, here, I mean, any legacy assets, infrastructure, political reasons even. Why are we lagging behind in the East, I wonder?
I'll try to be to stick to the facts. I think the reason why we are, separating a little bit East and West is that historically Eastern part is heritage of Soviet Union, and that has had a large impact on how the energy sector developed and what happened with infrastructure and so on. So after the Soviet Union dissolution in beginning of 1990s, 1991. Countries had a lot of things happening. There were new nations emerging, there were new countries established, and let's be fair, energy was not their first priority. There was a lot of happening in political world, and simply not enough attention to energy infrastructure, but equally to any other infrastructure. Politicians and decision makers were bothered with completely different things, which took us to where we are now, because that was the time to take an action. That was the time to maintain your assets, to potentially develop new assets and transform your systems. That hasn't happened because there was not enough attention, there was not enough investment, because the region at that moment was very dynamic, very unstable. No one had clarity on how it will develop further after the Soviet Union dissolution. So this lack of attention, this lack of structured and holistic approach to system development also happened in the energy sector. And this is where we are now, with infrastructure that is aging, infrastructure that very urgently needs renovation, often maintenance, often new solutions. That's a little bit of a background, and now it's changing. Now I think the awareness is already there. Experts in the field, but also politicians and decision makers, they realize that if we are to have an energy transition, if we are to have a green future, we need to start with infrastructure. And I would say that this is for now the key focus. How do we transform our assets, or what type of new assets do we need to build to make the decarbonization and green transition happen? So I think in our discussion that's the starting point that I would like to set up, is that we have all the infrastructure which we have to deal with. On the other hand, it gives us opportunity to make things right from the first try, because we have some learnings to take from the Western neighbor countries. We have something to learn from their mistakes, sometimes from the pathway that they have come through. So it's important time to take right decisions. And what's nice is that we have all the tools and all the inputs to take these decisions, and we need to be brave, and we need to be proactive and energetic in making right things in the Eastern region, and it will quickly catch up.
Yes, very, very thorough introduction. Thank you, Maksym. Yeah, very important to note that for what the West had 60, 70 years, we only had about 20, 30. So indeed, there's at least we have something to learn from, but we also are very much late. And I'm not letting you go just as of yet, because I have a follow-up question. Sorry, Maksym. I wonder, due to this lagging behind, what are the not infrastructural, but rather the regulatory and the market barriers present in energy markets in Eastern Europe, let that be power or gas, that is hindering the energy transition in the region at the moment?
The barriers are not really in the regulatory frameworks. I think there is very clear understanding of what type of frameworks need to be developed. I can see from perspective of Ukraine, of my country, that we are very closely following energy directives and energy regulation that is issued by EU. So we do not diverge from that, and we have a good example of frameworks that are working. The barriers are in the lack of stability. So those regulatory frameworks are very much unstable in Ukraine and potentially in other Eastern European countries. The reason being that it's very politicized. Any decisions that are being taken are politicized. Governments are changing quite frequently. So the biggest barrier is this absence of stable single pathway that we've decided we're gonna follow, and we follow. That's to me is the biggest barrier, but it's definitely not the lack of regulation. I think regulation is coming, it's being actively developed, also with the support of Western Europe. I think I would like to mention that a lot of European organizations are entering Ukraine and engaging with our decision makers, engaging with our Ministry of Energy and Climate, conducting studies together, developing strategies together. So this is already happening. I think what we need is stable future outlook, and things will change.
Yes, thank you, Maksym. It's also important to note here that whereas, for example, Maksym and Denisa are from Ukraine and Albania, which are non-EU countries. For example, we are from Greece and Hungary, which are EU countries, and there's a very fundamental difference between, there's an unseen barrier between the two regions, so to say, because EU financing and other support is imperative for, as also Maksym said, to have a coherent framework to follow, whereas countries in the Balkans, often not members of the EU, have it much harder in terms of support. Thank you very much for this system view that you presented here. I'd like to turn to Denisa now to get a little bit of regional knowledge. Denisa, you're researching entrepreneurial opportunities related to the energy transition in Eastern Europe and the Balkans. I wonder if you can introduce some of your findings as you are doing this research, and maybe tell us about the main regional circumstances that are important to consider and understand when talking about the energy transition in Eastern Europe, and maybe also how can Eastern Europe participate, and what do we need to understand?
Thank you for your question. Actually, the first stage of my research is mainly focused on Poland, Hungary, and Ukraine. So it's quite interesting seeing how different countries, different problems, right? So while Poland and Hungary are part of the EU, they do get some sort of funding, they do get a little bit more support, but still it's a bit different in the terms of the policies that are in place in the countries. They are not as supportive of the different technologies that can be implemented in them. So while the energy transitioning is happening, it's limited to the policy, to the technologies that are actually backed and favored by the government. So in both countries, you actually see that, they are basically closing down coal facilities, and they are also planning to extend the closing down of them until 49. So to the very last moment.
Very late.
Yeah. But what's happening is that the government is more supportive of solar PVs, and solar PVs can only have that much capacity in the country. So regulatory frameworks don't actually allow for projects in wind. And maybe from the panel discussion that we already also had before, we saw that Poland is mainly investing also in nuclear right now, putting large sums of money there. But these are projects that take a lot of years in development, and then maybe you also create a gap in how much energy you can actually provide to the people for the upcoming years. And apart from that, also not really allowing the wind sector to bloom can also bring a bit of difficulties right now. But if you take the long term into consideration, then the prices for wind will be cheaper in terms of buying the technologies and also investing in them, because the West will come up with more efficient ways of investing. So sometimes it's a bit smarter to wait, and sometimes it's a bit smarter to invest from the beginning, I would say.
Yeah, very well said. There's no one size fits all, I guess.
Yeah,
but it's
indeed.
also really not beneficial to have all these hampering regulation, which is actually not allowing for us to harness all this wind energy, for example. So I agree that sometimes can sound pretty silly. I have a follow-up question for you, Denisa.
sure.
I wonder if you have a country in mind that can be maybe called a front runner in the region, let that be in terms of renewable development or any kind of policy framework that they have in place that is, that's looking good in Eastern Europe right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to play favorites, but I was recently reading a report by Irena on renewable readiness assessment in Albania, actually, my home country. And Albania is even more than 95% reliant on hydropower in terms of electricity generation. So even this one is sort of inherited from the communism period in Albania, but is still doing quite well for the country in terms of meeting the demand. However, it's still a matter of modernizing the grid. It's still a matter of having even more renewables in the energy mix, even for Albania, because the capacity is there. It's one of the countries with the highest amount of sunny days in the region. So there's a lot of opportunities for implementing solar there, and also around 7,000 megawatt of wind, according to the readiness assessment. So it's quite interesting, but the policies have to be there, the government has to be supportive, and there also have to be a lot of investors that are actually willing to take the risk. Because, while it's interesting for investment as a country, the grid is really not modernized. And it's also a matter of sometimes you have underserved regions, because then when there is a peak demand time, then all the electricity is mainly supplied to city centers such as Tirana and Durrës, but not really to other regions. So modernizing the grids, I think, would be a must, even in countries in which the renewable scene is quite good.
Yeah, very good lesson learned here about first and foremost infrastructure and grid investments and then generation maybe. Thank you, Denisa. Albania looks, sounds very good for a Balkan country. Now to get a little bit of the technology context, I would turn to Antonios. I wonder, Antonios, what technologies are you looking at with excitement nowadays? This can also be on the consumer side, for example. What can we do as consumers of energy? You can hype us all kinds of smart technology and so on. I wonder what you have in mind.
Thank you, Csinskza. I would like to make a bridge of what Denisa just pointed out. The power grid, in my opinion, is one of the things that, actually not in my opinion, it is estimated that in Europe until 2030, we have to make an investment of 425 billion euros to upgrade our grid. And billion is with 9 zeros, so imagine the number. In Eastern Europe, the grid also needs to be updated to accommodate the future energy demand. But do you have the opportunity right now to upgrade the grid to such an extent that you'll be able to accommodate that future demand? While in Europe, we still have to make the whole transformation again, while we have already invested in our grid to reinforce our grid to be able to manage that supply and demand. So first of all, I would, if I could give one recommendation on a large scale in Eastern Europe, it would be to invest in the power grid in such a way that it will be able to accommodate the supply and demand of what we would need in 2050 and on. That's one thing. That's in a very large scale. But you asked, what can we do on the prosumer side? Well, that's interesting because in Western Europe, especially in the Netherlands, where I live and where we live, we see that the government was giving many subsidies in consumers acquiring solar panels. We have the feed-in tariffs, which give the consumers or the prosumers the ability to be financially compensated for the energy that they put into the grid for the same price that they would demand it from the grid, which gives an incentive for people to put solar panels on the roof. But those feed-in tariffs are going to be phased out in the coming future. It's estimated that in the Netherlands, for example, in 2023 they'll phase this out entirely. And this is because our grid, partly because our grid cannot handle that energy. But what if we, other than using the whole grid, move to regional storage of energy? Imagine a future in Eastern Europe and also in Western Europe where you have batteries in neighborhoods which are powered by neighborhood solar panels in each other's houses, and that we can use those batteries to power our electric vehicles, to power our houses. And the power grid and electricity is just one part of the problem. And I just named several solutions. But another thing that we can do, which is also happening in Western Europe, is that we're moving to powering or warming our houses with hydrogen. And hydrogen is one of the solutions. Heat pumps are another one. And I can simply say, and I will not go into detail, but summarized from what I've understood, the best solution for new buildings being developed is to install heat pumps to power our houses, which are far more efficient than using gas to power our houses. And it also helps with the energy transition. But for existing buildings, we can use the existing gas pipelines, add compressors, and push hydrogen in those pipelines to power or to warm our houses in the future. So regional energy storage, regional energy production, transforming our grid and leapfrogging that transition where we have to push in many investments, and also moving to hydrogen for powering our existing buildings, which would be 4 or 5 solutions, which in my opinion are technologies that Eastern Europe could use to accelerate their energy transition.
Abundant ideas. Thanks a lot. I would like to actually react on one of your points and also call Maksym for a little bit of help here. Because as far as I know, using hydrogen, which is at the moment extremely expensive and just almost non-existent yet, the technology. I mean, it is existent, but it's very hard to scale up and very expensive. To my understanding, it's not very efficient, especially not cost efficient to use hydrogen to heat our homes. Rather, we should use it for heavy industry, for example, which really needs all this very vast amounts of power to operate, and also these are very hard to abate sectors. Maksym, can you maybe react on this, because I think this is a strong point to make about hydrogen and also the use cases of what we should use these expensive technologies for.
Yeah, I think with hydrogen there is a lot of hype and a lot of conversations going on, but we have to distinguish the use cases that are economically feasible, and one of them is indeed industry decarbonization. Another one is aviation and transportation, and then we have long-term storage. So to me, these are the core applications of hydrogen that we will see. starting with those, I would say that there are, again, a lot of opportunities for cooperation between West and East Europe due to the fact that there is abundant wind and solar resource in Eastern Europe. There are projects, there are initiatives where which think about for now it's just ideas, it's plans and feasibility studies, but looking at the potential to produce this hydrogen in Eastern Europe, transport it to the Western Europe, and utilize it there, potentially also store it somewhere in between, and all of this can be done with already existing assets. You don't need to build much more. We know that there is a very well developed system of gas pipelines connecting eastern countries with western countries. In particular, there is a very large gas storage and gas pipeline going through the entire Ukraine all the way through the Poland to Germany. So recently there is an announcement that Ukrainian gas transmission system operator signed memorandum of cooperation with RWE for exploring the possibility to produce and store hydrogen in Ukraine and then to transport it to Germany and further in Europe via already existing gas pipelines. And that's a very nice solution because those gas pipelines, they're not going to be used very soon for different reasons, but we don't want them to become completely stranded assets. They are still operational. They're perfectly suitable to run another 10-20 years, and they need very little modernization to work with hydrogen. So I see this as a nice opportunity to, that provides win-win solution for everyone. We use existing infrastructure, we produce hydrogen that Western Europe has decided that it will need. We capitalize on resource availability from the Eastern Europe, so we develop more generation in the East, and everybody gains from that. So I think hydrogen is one of the big players, one of the big investment opportunities or collaboration opportunities for Eastern and Western countries.
Very good. Please react. Yeah.
I really agree, Maksym. That's a terrific answer. Powering or warming our homes with hydrogen might be a really small scenario in the future, but you're right. Long-term storage of hydrogen, for example, is one of the larger aspects that we could use. If you think about the energy crisis that we have experienced in the past year, where was the problem? The problem was that we didn't have enough energy stored where we needed it. And from what I understand and what I read, we have the opportunity in Eastern Europe with subterranean energy storage in salt caverns, in existing salt caverns, that we could use to store hydrogen. And these exist. And as Maksym pointed out, the infrastructure of the gas infrastructure already is there. We just need to add compressors, and we could use the salt caverns in Eastern Europe to store hydrogen, and the existing pipelines from Russia that travel all the way to Germany to transport the hydrogen from the east to the west, which would be a good revenue stream the other way around. So yeah, great opportunity there.
All we need is huge amounts of green electricity so we can use our electrolyzers to produce hydrogen and do this all. But yes, indeed, our huge gas grid and interconnections can be used for this, so very good. I might want to return to this leapfrogging notion that we mentioned here, Antonios. Could we be leapfrogging actually in Eastern Europe and adapt technology that has been proven to be efficient in Western Europe? And I also wonder if this culture, because I know that you in TU Delft have been working for 1 year, as you said, on the hydrogen-powered vehicle, right? Yeah. I wonder if this culture of tech labs and this very progressive approach to also educating students and involving them already in practical work could be implemented in Eastern Europe. And what experiences can you tell us? Maybe some more experiences from the Netherlands or from TU Delft specifically, or other countries.
Thanks, Csinskza. Something I'm really happy to talk about. Actually, with Maas was in the audience as well. 2 years ago, I participated in a student team in the Netherlands and in I think also in Germany. We have many student teams. These are teams that are fully run by students. There's a management department, an operational department, and the larger part of the teams are the engineering departments. And they work on student projects. So what we did in our team is that we took a year of our studies to work full-time on a project which is called the Eco Runner project, where we created a hydrogen-powered efficient vehicle. And with this vehicle, we had to design it, manufacture it, and then race it against other student teams in the Netherlands, but also teams from Spain, France, Italy, Germany, and Belgium. And the goal of these student teams are various. There are multiple goals. One is to give us experience in the field, practical experience in the field, and to apply our theoretical knowledge in a practical way at a young age. But one of the other reasons is to inspire the youth and the elderly and to explain to them how new renewable energies and how sustainable energy technologies work. So, for example, we lecture children on hydrogen, and we explain to the elderly why hydrogen is going to play an important role in the future. And these student teams are a real thing of culture in the Netherlands, and a thing that technical universities in Eastern Europe could easily adapt and form to inspire the young, to inspire the elderly. But there's another reason. These student teams in the Netherlands, for example, sometimes become reality. And as I briefly said before, right now I'm working in a company. It's called Lightyear. This company develops solar electric vehicles, but it was actually founded by students. It was a student project called from Solar Team Eindhoven, Technical University of Eindhoven. And this team created a solar electric vehicle and raced it in Australia. They had to travel from the north to the south of Australia fully on solar power. And they did this. And during their competition, they realized that solar electric vehicles can actually be the future. So after years of brainstorming, they founded this company, which right now, from 5 students, became a company with 280 people working there. And they're creating these solar electric vehicles. So these student teams are actually something that doesn't only inspire the youth, the elderly, and gives practical experience to students, but it can also become reality, and it can also power the electric future or the renewable energy transition.
If I can actually piggyback on that, because lately, together with the team, we've had a couple of conversations on how universities and student teams work different in different countries, right? So in the Netherlands, you actually see it in terms of meritocracy, like students that really want to do something, they go for it. They are, just like you, developing projects and pilots from a very young age. And then these are the people that become leaders of the future, actually. Whereas in Eastern Europe, you don't really see it as much. You don't really have these working groups, and the universities are not that supportive. So what you end up with, even in the political field, it's maybe people that haven't really deserved these spots, or maybe people that don't have enough of expertise in the field because they haven't really been touching projects from a young age. So I also think there is a lot of opportunities there, because where change comes from, we've seen in multiple cases, is that it comes from educating the people. And if people have sufficient education on what projects are coming up, what opportunities there are, then the change will definitely come and stay in Eastern European countries as well.
Yeah.
You want to react, Max, or can I?
Yeah, I think if we talk about what's missing in Eastern countries, and well, I can speak about Ukraine. What's missing to make renewable transition happen is, of course, there is regulation. Of course, there is infrastructure and so on. But also, it's expertise, and expertise is something that there's a huge gap in the fundamental knowledge that our education system provides really well. And the actual understanding of how to apply this fundamental knowledge into real-world projects and how to make them, financially viable. Because some of the technologies that are being studied are so theoretical, and I'm not saying it's not needed. I'm saying that we also need something in between this deep fundamental research and real world, and this part in between is missing in our education sector. So that's something that I realized after coming to the Netherlands, after having studied in the Netherlands, that oh wow, so this is why they succeed. That's what I would like to add.
Yeah, just imagine that the people in Eastern European universities, I mean, maybe even earlier, at an earlier stage, just as you said, educating children about hydrogen. This is something which I cannot imagine that I would have learned as a 7, 8 year old, or even a little bit older. But also the university culture and all the student clubs is just not the same. If everyone would have this expertise, or at least access to this expertise and interest, by the way, because awareness raising is also very important, then we would live in a completely different world, and we wouldn't have to talk about Eastern European energy transition that is late in the region. So thank you very much for this. And this actually leads us to the next question, which I have to all of you guys. I want to transmit some knowledge to the people who are listening to us about what skills and what knowledge do you guys use in your everyday work and your studies and so on. And I will begin with myself, because as a consultant, for example, I could not get along, I think, without some sort of economic knowledge, because I'm a policy advisor, so I do have to know how these things work actually, how supply and demand work, and just the basics of why these externalities exist and why are we where we are right now, and also some sound climate change knowledge about like why we actually need to change the system. So I wonder what you guys would say to that, and what do you use in your everyday work. Maybe we can begin from the other end. Or also, Denisa, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, for me, what I've seen, it's quite important, is the relationships that you build with people. No matter what industry you work in, no matter what you're doing, in the end of the day, the way that projects are going to be realized is when you're working with other people. So I would put a lot of importance in the networking aspect. If you're doing something, try to connect with the people that are in the field. And apart from that, if you're a young professional trying to find your way in the renewables field, I think it's quite important to actually talk to the people that have been doing this for a lot of years, because they probably know more than us about it. They can give us some very good advice on where to go with our plans, or maybe even what's attractive sometimes. But yeah, don't take everything that the people say for granted in the end of the day. But I do think that there is a lot to learn from people that are rather experienced in the field.
Maksym?
Yeah, I can probably relate to what you said from the perspective of being consultant. I think it's a bit of a specific skill set that you need to possess if you want to be consultant in renewable sector. But for that one, you would need a high level view on everything, unfortunately. That's what it is. So you need to know about technology, you need to understand how economics works, you need to follow the policy context, you need to know a little bit about regulation and how it is developed. And you don't need to become an expert in one specific area. It's rather having this, holistic understanding of how the entire sector operates. It's what is really valued if you are to be a consultant. That can be different if you are to be an engineer, or if you are to be manager, or whichever other type, perhaps working on innovations, being an entrepreneur, then the skill set is different. But I guess it's everywhere. So it's not that easy to identify one specific skill that is characteristic for energy sector. I would say it's a skill set that you need.
I fully agree with that. If I can add several things. First of all, Denisa, you correctly pointed out that networking is one really big part of it. And from what I've experienced is that people in the energy sector, at least in the energy sector, because it's the only one I really know, they're so keen to teach others about it. I mean, everybody's so enthusiastic when you talk about energy. Everybody wants to tell their own story and what they're working on. So I think that's a really important part. And Maksym, you pointed out correctly that the skill set is really important. And I want to add something else to that. This morning I was listening to Leon in another talk about startups and about investing in startups. And from what I heard there as well was that the problem isn't the money, it's the ideas. We need more energy ideas. And in that sense, we would need more entrepreneurs. We would need more people that have the social business skills to set up a business with the technology-based good innovations that are able to create new energy innovations that can accelerate the energy transition. So in general, we need a broad skill set. It's not only startups, it's indeed also giving good advice like you guys are doing in consulting. It's different things. And as you also pointed out, the practical studies that we have in the West and that you might be missing a little bit in the East with the more theoretical studies, that is also something that the East should fight for. What I really liked about the sustainable energy technology study that we have in 4 different universities in the Netherlands is that it's really practical. They teach you about solar energy, wind energy, and storage solutions, and they tell you what the newest technologies on the market are and which companies are actually working on those. So it's really like practical, it's hands-on, everybody's talking about it, it's fun, it's innovative, and it's growing fast. And in that sense, it's I also, like, personally, I really enjoy working at a smaller, fast-growing company, because you get the freedom as a young professional to bring your creative ideas and your knowledge to the table and to put that into reality. So I think a combination of knowledge, innovation, and the idea to put your creativity in that is a strong combination of how we can accelerate it.
Sounds very good. It's interesting what you say about we need new ideas and innovation, because I tend to think that we have so many ideas on the table already. We actually got it figured out in theory, and then it's really a question of funding, a really question of politics, about actually walking the walk instead of talking the talk. But of course we need innovation, and we always, the world is always going to change, and it's not going to just stand still. So it's very interesting what you said.
And
Denisa,
yeah, if I can add to that with regard to the innovations as well. Initially, I was also super pro it. I would always talk about innovation and entrepreneurship, because that's also what how I started my career. But then, as I started working in the field more, and I saw the urgent need for deployment of renewables, the thing is that when you're talking about innovations, they probably need a couple of years in the to be tested, and then to be seen if they can actually be applied in more stages. They can be used in more countries. The scalability of the innovations. So yeah, I'm also very supportive of the innovation still, but I don't think that having more makes them more attractive or makes the energy transitioning as a process easier, because they still have to be tested for a couple of years before.
Yeah. Does anyone want to react on that? Or
Yeah. I will react. I also agree with Denisa. I think that we need good ideas, and that we need investors who choose the ones who have a good business case. Because let's be honest, the whole energy transition is powered, and it's sad, but it's powered by money. If it wasn't financially feasible to accelerate it, then people wouldn't be interested. And that's where policymakers come into place, right? Because they have to make it financially feasible or economically attractive for innovators, entrepreneurs, and companies to innovate and to become green or clean. Another thing that we haven't really touched upon is sustainability in general. I mean, we've really been talking about energy innovations, but another thing that I'm noticing in the Netherlands, for example, is that our supermarkets, for example, they're becoming so sustainable. Plastic bags are going away. Our largest supermarket,
Albert Heijn.
Albert Heijn, yeah, is the franchise. I mean, they're removing plastic bags, and they're putting paper bags in them, or plastic, or like nets which you can reuse. And there's all this like circular economy that the West really focuses on. I'm actually not sure. How do you see that happening in the East?
I also think that in the West there is also a lot of greenwashing happening by the companies. So
agree,
what you
yeah.
see is
not
not
just in the West.
Yeah. So in Eastern Europe, if there is greenwashing in the West, in Eastern Europe, that's just going to be multiplied because of the way that companies are maybe used to work, and there is not a lot of transparency when we're talking about maybe social media promotion and all of that. But yeah, I think it's again a matter of opportunities. It's just a matter of who's actually going to take the chance and say, okay, I really want to build a sustainable project and work on it and find a good team of people that are also willing to invest the time. Because in a lot of Eastern European countries, you still don't even have the right means to segregate waste, which is quite problematic. And it's something that if a group of people is really willing to do it, and they put the time in it, they develop the right project, it's just going to get accepted because it's segregating waste. So yeah, it's also such opportunities that have to be followed through, and these are also opportunities for the young generation.
I think an important nuance to add here is that whereas in the West we have a lot of private companies being able to deal with this. So, for example, waste management. When you look to the East, simplest example, Hungary, state-owned utilities, water, waste, energy. In the East, this kind of bundling and this kind of privatization just hasn't come yet, and this is also a huge systemic barrier that we have to overcome, because you cannot just go as an entrepreneur and say that I'm going to take care of waste because the state doesn't let you.
Yeah, indeed, but also apart from having governmentally owned utilities, you also have maybe monopolies, which even make the matter even a bit more difficult for investors that are willing to see if something is going to work in Eastern European countries, because then there is not really any competition. All the projects are being granted to this utility because this is the way that it has been done traditionally. So yeah, these are also some sort of challenges that still have to be addressed in the region.
Cool. So we're thinking about challenges and about problems that we have in the East. So Maksym, do you think, like, from a policy perspective, what's the thinking practically, and how could we have maybe overthrow these monopolies? How could we have government in Eastern Europe be open up? Yeah, apart from
if I had an
revolution.
answer, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah. But how can we open up that ecosystem for younger companies to take part in those innovative ideas?
Yeah, I think I can very much relate to what Csinskza said about the monopolies. It's also an issue in Ukraine, and how to deal with them. Yeah, I haven't met a person yet who would know how to deal with them, because they are so strong. But it's right. If there was important thing to address, I think it's to deal with monopolies, and not to say that they need to be completely removed from the market. I think they need to be managed, because we have to recognize that monopolies are frequently the most innovative companies. They are often drivers of the transition. The issue is that they might drive it in not necessarily a society optimal direction. So therefore, I think governments have to work with monopolies. They have to develop regulations that in the long run would prevent further monopolization of the market and would allow new entrants. But in the short term, I think monopolies have to become friends of policymakers and have to become part of their team. That's my opinion, and that's based on what I see in Ukraine.
But you can continue. No. No, what I was going to say is that in the energy sector in specific, we have seen this reoccurring theme that the technologies and their implementation is always a couple of steps ahead of the policies in the different countries. So I also think what can be done is that, maybe private companies start with small projects, maybe they invest on their own, maybe they also invite foreign investors, and then the policies are going to follow, and then maybe the antitrust laws become more important in these countries. But yeah, I think maybe the private sector would also have to take some first steps.
Interesting. Something like, as I pointed out earlier, I'm Greek myself. Something that Greece, the new government of Greece has started, since New Democracy started there about a year and a half ago, they lowered the tax percentage for Greeks that had left Greece in order for them to come back. So they've created incentives for brain gain, because Greece has seen a lot of brain drain in the past 25 years. So what Greece is doing now, they're creating incentives to create that brain gain, and one of them is the largest one is financial, which has incentivized a lot of Greeks to come back to their home country with a lot of capital, with businesses that have started also innovative new companies in Greece that weren't there, which have brought in the country ideas from other countries. So maybe that would be another idea for policymakers in the East, to incentivize people who have left the East with financial means or monetary means to come back to the country, and thereby create brain gain in Eastern Europe.
I think this is already happening. It's a good example that Greece applied to gain back the expertise. I see it in Eastern countries also happening to generally attract investments. I think governments try to create favorable environments to attract investments from the foreign countries to make sure that there are attractive tax regimes, there are attractive credit regimes, and support with any sort of local liaison with stakeholders. That's already happening. I think it's very nice dynamics. I'm glad that you gave an example from Greece.
Nice, Maksym, nice. Sounds great.
Great, and this will all make hopefully Eastern Europe much more attractive in the future. I think we can conclude that it's still we didn't change our mind on the region being a very, very worthy place to look at and to attract investment and talent and businesses and so on. We did very well touch upon business ideas, policies and technologies as well that can be used, so thanks a lot. And I think plenty of food for thought for young professionals as well on what needs to happen with education and so on. So thanks a lot, guys. I think we came to the end of this panel. Thanks a lot for Maksym, Antonios, Denisa, and the audience, and for Enlit for hosting us. Very nice discussion. Thank you.
And thanks,
Thank you,
Csinskza.
Csinskza.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.